Hello and welcome to Swiss Info. I'm Susan Masika and we are on location in Minnesota. This is Lake Minnetonka behind me and that's about a half-hour drive from Minneapolis, the capital. And joining me are members of the Twin Cities Swiss American Association, so the Twin Cities being Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I would just love it if everybody could introduce themselves, maybe starting across from me.
Hi, my name is Patrick Krugel. I came to the Twin Cities in '93, so that brings me here for 26 years. I came here originally because of my uncle, and I want to see the world, I want to see the United States. That's how I ended up in Minnesota.
Thank you, Patrick.
Hi, I'm Patrick Fisher, and I'm here in Minnesota now since 1990, so about 29 years. And I came here to learn English, discovered we could go to college, went to college, and never went back.
Excellent, welcome.
My name is David Merker. I came to the US in 1991, originally to Texas in the larger Dallas-Fort Worth area to study. I spent a semester and then I ended up staying. I got my master's in Florida and then I moved up here in '98 to marry my wife. She is Minnesotan. She made me an offer I couldn't refuse.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. So, here in the run-up to the parliamentary elections in October back in Switzerland, I'd like to ask you, do you vote back in Switzerland?
Yes, I definitely vote, and most election and on most issues, which is pretty much a quarterly basis, yes.
And why is that important to you?
It's to stay connected and to show that one cares. And I only vote on issues that really feel that I'm competent to weigh in, meaning federal and state.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Patrick?
Yes, I vote too, and if possible I vote every election, so most elections I vote. And for me it's also A, connection, B, I still pay retirement money in Switzerland. I pay into the retirement fund in Switzerland, so there's self-interest in it that I want to see that Switzerland stay stable, at least for the foreseeable future.
And you, Patrick?
I want to be connected to Switzerland. That's why I vote every time. It's easy, it takes a couple minutes. I study the documentation which I receive in the mail, and then I go online and do the voting. Simple as that.
So you vote online?
Yes.
Anybody else?
Yes, in Canton Bern up to now, this will now change since the Geneva system will come to an end. But so far we were among some of the privileged to be able to take advantage of e-voting.
I vote in Thurgau, and there was for a while you could vote e-vote, but I discovered that they had the cutoff period 2 weeks before the election, and so I decided to send it in.
But would you like to be able to
I would
do
like
it online?
I think online vote is the way it goes in the future. Of course, saves you money because I don't have to actually mail the thing. But I think definitely once it's a little more convenient and maybe also more timely, that you could actually even vote maybe a week before or the night before. I'm a person who makes short-term decisions, so sometimes I have to mull over something before I make my cross or write my yes or no. And so once e-voting is more flexible, I would definitely use it.
Any concerns about security?
No, I think the Geneva system has proven to be very reliable, very safe. I understand it's mainly the funding that was the trigger to seize that. Of course, there is always concern. I always compare it when at the advent of trains, people were afraid when speed would go above 40 miles an hour, one would lose the soul. And I think there are some fears of new technologies, and no system is safe. Even the mail-in voting, is technically not 100% safe.
What would you say about that?
I like the system because it's very secure, because it gives you a code at the end. You can verify that code. that your votes are correctly sent. So it's a great system. I think United States could implement such a system as well. I mean, it would be more complicated because there's certainly more people, but other than that, it's a great, secure system. It should be expanded, I think.
So that would be something that you could say the political system at home is doing well, that they're trying to implement this to make it easier, especially for Swiss abroad to vote. But what are some things that aren't going so well, in your opinion, in the Swiss government? What do you think the parliamentarians could be doing better?
The way I see it, I think we see a similar thing as in the United States, and that's a polarization, a little bit from the right and from the left. And I think that's something which we are in Switzerland. It's a consensus democracy, and I think we would do well to still be able to compromise. I see that when I read the newspaper, sometimes I have the impression that there's a polarization coming. My observation is Switzerland is always 20 years behind the United States in many ways, and that I somehow have the feeling that something is coming which will not be good for Switzerland, especially in the polarization area.
Any other thoughts on that?
No, I'm very content about the Swiss system. We humans are not perfect in any way, but I'm very pleased how the multi-party system, which requires that people have to find consensus, build consensus, find a better way, and to Patrick's point, it's very important that we maintain that we retain that we stay away from the fringes, so that we really move toward each other instead of moving apart.
But how can the government do that? What can the parliamentarians do?
To always look for a dialogue and be committed to really find a better way, to work with each other instead of just representing a party line, and to really look out for the interest of the Swiss people, and in our case, obviously, of the Swiss overseas, Swiss abroad.
We need to maybe come together towards the middle. Right now, it's either very conservative or very liberal. We need to come back in the middle again, making more compromises.
And in terms of the makeup of Parliament, do you think there need to be then more of a certain part? So you'd say more centrist parliamentarians, or do you see it somewhere else that would need more representation?
I think we just need to come back together again, learning how to make compromises. Not just it's either total the extreme liberal or the extreme conservative side. I think we need to come back together towards the middle.
And what are some other changes you'd like to see?
To me, changes in Switzerland. I'm still a little bit. I think Switzerland is going in a direction where I think it loses its soul to a certain extent. It kind of drifts too much towards Europe, I think, in a way where, I was. Since I grew up in Switzerland, I appreciated the fact that you actually can know your politician, and I think Switzerland actually going towards Europe, even becoming a member of Europe, will actually destroy our political culture, will destroy the power of the individual that the individual citizen has in Switzerland, because we become one of 500 million versus one of 8.5 million. And that is a very big concern, and I just have very much concern about the last election, which on May 19th, even though the whole thing was about guns, it seemed like, I think it is Switzerland really, in my opinion, tactically made a mistake, because now the European Union will look at the decision and say the argument of the Swiss population is we want to have free movement in Schengen, which I think is great, but they even are willing to give up their own self-determination for that in many aspects, and I think that is a serious problem. And I think we will only know in 20-25 years what this particular election will have cost for the Swiss political system and the direction of Switzerland.
Other thoughts? Would anybody be open to joining the EU?
Joining the EU, it's always a balance between self-determination, but at the same time, 1 in 4 Swiss, or more actually, almost half of the Swiss abroad live in Europe. 1 in 4, I think, just in France alone, and as such, close cooperation is vital. In the same matter is also we have to be very careful where economic interests and the humanitarian piece of Switzerland, that we find a balance there with the export industry. I see there's economic incentives obviously to export weaponry even in civil war countries, but from a Swiss abroad and as goodwill ambassadors, so to speak, they stand for tolerance, and we depend on that. We depend on the tolerance of our host countries. It's very important that we take steps, that the Swiss government on every level takes steps, that we are that goodwill ambassador to the world.
What do you think, Patrick?
Well, before I came to the United States, I always thought Switzerland should join the European Union, but a couple of years later, when I came, after I settled here, I came to the realization that it's almost better for Switzerland not to join the European Union, because Switzerland is a unique country. They don't compete with the big European nations. They certainly don't compete with the United States. They're an island in the middle of the ocean. So it's probably not the best to join the European Union, because they would have to give up lots of freedom, and they might have to make not very popular choices.
What's interesting to me is that you all have a strong opinion and feeling about it, even though you live in another country. So are you thinking maybe of going back someday? Is it that part of the reason why it's important to you what happens?
It's not so much that one has ever left. I think that's important determination, even though there's a geographic separation. In my heart, I've never left Switzerland. That's why also I'm involved in the Swiss American community, and I'm involved with the organization of the Swiss abroad. It's to have that close connectedness. As such, I'm just a phone call away. It's a distance gives that artificial separation, but in our hearts, if I look at our members, long-time members who have been here 40, 50, 60 years, I know deep in their hearts, if you go in their homes, they've not left Switzerland. We are not like exile Swiss, like some people would like to portray us. We are as much Swiss. We are, in essence, the best ambassador for Switzerland in our respective countries.
Thoughts about going back?
As we talked before, I definitely think I would like to go back, at least for retirement, or maybe earlier. My parents are still living there, and to me that's still very important. I would love to go back as long as they're alive. But right now I have my profession here, and age discrimination in Switzerland is an issue, and so if I would go back as a 50-something, I'm almost certain I will not find a job again in the profession I'm in right now, or in the profession I've learned in Switzerland. And so for me to go back would mean that I would either open my own business or do something else where I can start myself and earn my own money, because I will never be able to go back into corporate or business Switzerland, even though I'm an MBA, I have all these credentials. But as I realized when I had a short stint at UBS in Switzerland about 7-8 years ago, I'm too American. My mannerisms are more American. And so that actually was an interesting experience for me. So if I go back, I will start something else, so I have to make money on my own.
Well, that's a good question. I think I love Switzerland, but I also love the United States. As far as retirement goes, Switzerland is pretty much the worst country you can retire in because it's so expensive. Any other country, it's a lot easier to retire. Life seems a little less complex in the United States than living in Switzerland. There's more, you can live in the mountains in the United States, you can live in a big city, you can live in the country. There seems more options here, you have more options. But on the other hand, it would be nice to, live in Switzerland as well. But it's, I think, mainly because Switzerland is very expensive to live. Certainly, if you have a fixed income, if you're on a fixed income, you're definitely better off in the United States.
What are some other differences between there and here? Things that really stand out to you now that you've been here a while, some longer than others? What's maybe something that you can do here that you wouldn't have been able to do there?
I don't know, it's also, when we return to Switzerland, it always strikes me in council meetings of the organization Swiss Abroad. As soon as we're in Switzerland, there's a certain Dörflichkeit that catches up with each one of us, a certain Swissness, and we joke about that. Mm-hmm. We kind of almost fall into our old ways.
Can you give an example? Or two?
A great example would be when I proposed to, just over a year ago, during the spring session, to introduce English as a language, not as on parity with federal German and French, and it was almost seen as treason. Half of the council is brand new, and some are younger. And I wondered, and it's incredible how they rallied. It's almost like it was treason on the country, where from left to right on the political spectrum, I felt like I was just committed treason here. And it's interesting. If we would have had this discussion probably overseas, in Canada, here in the US, it would be a no-brainer. Of course we should do that, to allow the second and third generation Swiss maybe to participate in the process. But there's this fierce pride that we cannot shake, and it's funny. It goes to what we eat, even, drinking our panache, and it's fun, but you can never take a Swiss out of us. You can take us out of Switzerland, but you can never take the Swiss out of us.
Other Swiss habits or things that die hard?
Also, not that nice, but when I compare the United States and Switzerland, and even here, the Swiss Association, I have to say, the Swiss are always very well organized. I mean, Switzerland always strive for perfection. I mean, in America here, every once in a while you wing it, okay? But in Switzerland, try to wing something and you get into serious trouble. And so I mean, I think I could have never done in my life what I did here in Switzerland. I mean, there's some crazy stuff. I mean, buying as a 20-year-old a house and renting out to students and still go to college, I mean, just stuff like this. You can't do this in Switzerland. It's simply not possible. And then again, if something doesn't work, you wing it. You somehow find a way to do it. In Switzerland, everything is very organized, and you have to really look that you stay within the tracks and don't wear off, So, and that is great because everything runs smooth. Sometimes the breakout is just not there. Sometimes, and I'm a little bit personal, a little bit rebel. And once in a while you have to do something else, And here you can do this. You pay for it, but you can still do it.
I think the biggest difference between Switzerland and the United States is the Swiss. It always have to be perfect. It can't be just half. United States is just, they almost start something and then they figure it out along. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just an example, you look at the roads, how they built the roads here. It goes fast. It needs to go fast. it might not look 100% perfect, but it's done, you know. Sometimes the Swiss way is, it just takes a little more, it's more complicated, it takes longer, but then it's more perfect, because the Swiss, they want to have it perfect, orderly, clean, you know.
And what do you think the perception of Switzerland is in the United States? What do you, the Americans that you may work with or live nearby or friends, what are things that you think that they associate with?
That we never take a position on things, always play the neutral card, you know, you don't have to commit as such. That's what's seen, that's where the jokes go. Of course we are, like some would say, maybe fiercely opinionated, but the perception, and we are the great beneficiaries of a great reputation that Switzerland enjoys, and it is actually our duty as Swiss abroad to keep that alive, because it's oftentimes that's the interaction that people have with us. When they interact with us, they in essence say it's an extension of Switzerland when they realize that we are Swiss.
I mean, the first thing I usually hear when I say I'm from Switzerland, oh, what a beautiful country, you know. So that's those who know Switzerland or that have heard of Switzerland, it's either cheese, chocolate, or a beautiful country. But shortly thereafter, actually, and of course in Minnesota, if they don't think you come from Sweden. But otherwise, I think also they pretty soon figure out, you know, our reliability, or that we want to make it perfect, you know. That is something which then either they observe or you know, that you come on time to work, for example. You know, for example, I always, my boss says, you know, you always here at work, you're always on time. And I said, yeah, that's just the way we do it at home. You know, that's how I was raised. You know, whereas an American who say, okay, I'm 15 minutes late, so who cares? You know, so I think it is that reliability, and also that it is a beautiful country, which the first perception an American has when he hears about Switzerland. Especially now the secret bank accounts are gone, you know, there's something else now they can focus on.
I think most Americans think about Switzerland from the movie, the famous movie in the mountains. I forgot the title. It's actually an Austrian-made movie.
Oh yeah,
film.
The Sound of Music.
The Sound of Music.
Oh, sure.
The Sound of Music is a classical one. They see Switzerland, you know, with the mountains and beautiful scenery and peace, clean, orderly. They don't know much about the modern Switzerland or the political system. They don't know much about that. So it's nice that way, you know. So it's okay. And I think on the other side, the Swiss think about the Americans. They're very optimistic. They see an American much more optimistic than a European. They are friendly, extremely friendly, particularly in the service, in the hospitality sector. You know, they're always friendly. They're always laughing and in a good mood.
What do you think about Uli Mauer's recent visit with President Trump? It came at sort of rather short notice.
No, we are proud that finally a U.S. president, you know, invited the Swiss president. That was first. You know, big kudos. But of course, there's self-interest. You know, the more, if you are more of an abrasive personality, you need then the diplomat. You need those individuals who find the dialogue with Venezuela, with Iran, with Venezuela, and other nations. You know, it's and our current president, now the President Trump, realizes that, and yeah, gave him that courtesy visit. I enjoyed that. I appreciate it from a Swiss. It warmed my heart. Again, it doesn't matter who it is. It just that the office of president extends that olive branch, so to speak. I was very grateful.
What do you think?
Quite honestly, I was in my professional life. It kind of passed by me. So when was it actually?
Oh, I think it was early June.
June, yeah. Early June,
Right.
I was actually trying setting this up, and so I was totally somewhere else. Yeah, so I definitely have to read up on that.
My dad talked about it. It was quite a big deal in Switzerland because that hasn't happened for a long time, right? As David said, more than 20 years, right?
No, ever.
Forever?
Yeah, forever.
That never
That's what I hear. I don't know.
I think it was more than time because United States has a serious crisis about the trade jobs. So I think they're looking into the education system in Switzerland, the apprenticeship program. So the Department of Education started to look into that. So they're working together, with the Swiss government. Also, this banking trade secret issue hasn't been exactly easy for Switzerland. So it's good to see that finally they're talking to each other.
And
Both
personally,
governments.
Speaking of banking, have you had any problems? Are there things that you feel like as Swiss abroad that you could be looked after better by the Swiss government?
I work in a bank, so no, and also I literally disconnected all my bank accounts in the mid-90s, and so at this point I have absolutely no Swiss bank account in Switzerland anymore. I also don't have one because I'm federally licensed, a stockbroker license, and so having another bank account abroad is actually something that would not be very good, and you would have to report that. And since I disconnected everything. But I had, when I worked in Switzerland, I learned how difficult this is, especially at UBS, because I could not have opened a Swiss bank account if I wouldn't have, especially also a brokerage account or a Depositen account, as we call it in Switzerland. You, as an American citizen, you cannot open. I had a friend of mine who came at the same time to Switzerland as me. I opened one at UBS as an employee, but my friend who also dealt with stocks, he could not open a Swiss Depositen account and could not buy stocks in Switzerland. He still traded everything in the United States from Switzerland. So there's definitely a United States citizen is even if of Swiss extraction at this point is in that sense a second-class citizen, that it will be very hard for me to actually go back and reopen Swiss bank accounts with an American passport. So I definitely think this is something which, if I will go back, or if the United States or Switzerland is interested to actually for their Swiss people to still have money in Switzerland, let's say from an inheritance or something like this, that they make laws or actually make possible that they can do this and with reporting, because the banks just say basically it's too expensive for us. We don't want to go into that legal swamp anymore, and so we just kick you all out. And even in the community here, in the Swiss community, there are many Swiss which basically received the letters from the bank who said, "Dear John, goodbye. Take your money and leave because we're going to close your account." And so, to me, as a Swiss citizen, I think that is incomprehensible, because I still have family. I know in maybe 10, 20 years I will need another bank account, because I don't want to take all the Swiss money I might have, I might inherit or whatever over the United States if I intend to come back to Switzerland for retirement.
Not a problem for me. I have family in Switzerland, so it's not a problem for me.
You mean a relative who helps you keep some money aside, or?
I don't worry about that. It doesn't apply to me. That the bank I make money here. I pay taxes here. If I live in Switzerland, I pay taxes in Switzerland. So it just doesn't apply to me. I don't see why the Swiss banks are so stubborn. Because again, you work in Switzerland, you pay taxes in Switzerland. You work in the United States, you pay taxes in the United States. That's how it should be. There shouldn't be a middle section. That's how it used to be. So, and United States they don't need to know. I don't think they need to, they need to worry about what happens in the United States and not what happens in Switzerland. That's what I think.
The threat of punitive damages obviously is big and real, and then banks obviously have that shock and awe to a degree. Some of it is self-inflicted, mainly from a bank that already was mentioned, but other banks obviously the same way. But it also goes to the very nature, almost come full circle of where this discussion has been going, the difference between America or the US especially and maybe Switzerland, where Switzerland is quickly, it's almost like these are the new realities and we just accept that, whatever they are. Maybe it's imposed from the US or perceived imposed, versus maybe the American way is finding that better way, maybe a little more free-spirited, and it has an influence on us. Even though when we are in Switzerland we understand the argument why we cannot have accounts. When I put on my Swiss hat, when I put my American hat on, then I said, let's find a way. There needs to be a way, and it's we don't just accept a real or perceived reality. That's what is so great about this nation. We push the boundaries. We dream of something and get it accomplished. That's also maybe one of the main reasons I wouldn't really want physically return to Switzerland, because I think I'm almost too free-spirited. Maybe that's why I came here to begin with.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time. I'd like to finish with a lighter question about a tradition, a Swiss tradition that you keep alive in your American life, and why?
Well, there's many traditions. One of them, the reason or a good way to keep those traditions alive is joining the Twin Cities Swiss American Association. We celebrate many traditions, like we have an annual fondue event, we have Santa Claus and Schmutzli around Christmas. That's one way of celebrating the traditions. We also celebrate it with drinking schnapps, kirsch.
Okay, that's several traditions, but what's your favorite?
My favorite, I would say my favorite is probably, that's a good question. I have many, I don't have one particular one. I would say probably Christmas, December 6th, Santa Claus and Schmutzli.
Okay, for me, celebrating Swiss traditions, I think two that come especially to mind is, I like here in the Twin Cities, the 1st of August celebration, and also having worked in a cheese shop in Switzerland, I also throw good fondue, and I like to come to the fondue event of the Swiss. The one that I participate in more actively year-round, I'm the range master of the local Swiss Rifle Club, and so in the sense I help or participate in keeping the Schützenwesen or the shooting tradition of Switzerland alive here in Minnesota.
Yeah, one is the community. My favorite community tradition is our bonfire that we have. We actually just early tonight we were coordinating with Patrick and some of the others the build of that bonfire, which is spectacular, especially when we light that up. It could put many others to shame.
But for August 1st.
August 1st, that bonfire, that is a critical part of that. That's from a community point of view. And for us as a family, it's almost like as many Friday evenings as possible to kind of to bring about the weekend is to have a cheese fondue. And we just really enjoy that. Some in my family enjoy it more than others, but we are in the majority.
All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us. Really great to hear your opinions and ideas.